TAC and AOB automation. So today's presentation is going to be a journey we've been on in Mid-Yorkshire around how we could try and automate some of our key year-end processes. So just introducing myself, I'm Simon Hosey. I'm the Head of Financial Accounting and Control over at Mid-Yorkshire Hospital Trust. Wasim, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm the Senior Finance Manager and I work under Simon Hosey.
Thank you. So just moving on. So today's presentation is going to be about how we looked at trying to automate some of our year-end manual processes. So in financial services, one of the key challenges we have at year-end is obviously producing the accounts. And that is primarily done via populating a NHSE return, which has these tabs along called TACs. And they're very, very complicated. And over the years, we've manually produced a lot of working papers at our trust, which allows us to populate these TACs. So what we've found is we've got ways of populating these TACs, but they can be quite manual. So we'll have to go in, reconcile all the accruals, get an accruals listing, for example, populate debtors and creditors. We'll have to go in and put in the revenue, the capital, everything. And it is really, really hard work. And to be honest, by the time you finish doing all your working papers, it could take up to 2 weeks. And that's kind of about the amount of time you have to do the year end. So what we've realised is that it's also quite high risk. So there's a lot of errors there. By the time you finish them, we always make the comment, we have 2 weeks, the auditors have 2 months, because by the time our financial management team have done their bit, that's kind of what we're left with. So it was about, could we try and do something about that and get some of this stuff done more automatically and less manually? And I've also made the point at the bottom that we have quite a manual process, or did have a manual process for compiling AOB transactions. So this is where we are interacting with other NHS entities. We not only have to cast along all of the TACs in terms of how much money have we spent with the trusts, NHS England, etc., what is the debtor creditor positions. We also then have to present that as an organisational listing, and we have to make sure it reconciles all the way through. And I know from my own perspective, having done that a few times, it's probably one of the main reasons I've got a lot of hair left. It can be a very difficult process. So what are the main issues? So for us, when we were having a look to say what could we do better, we were thinking downloading data and checking it is fine, but it takes time and it can be a real pain if you then have to redo that, because as we know, the position might change, something might happen, you might discover something, and then you've got to go through and do it all over again. So we do have some good stuff. So we have the TB level report. So this is trial balance. So we currently use a system called NEP. There's a really good tool called SmartView. We've set that up in a way that we can automatically create cash flows, balance sheet, and all the rest of it. Where we struggle is when we want to cut across and start looking at transactions, and that's when it gets really slow. So it's like it might tell me what prepayments are, but then to bring up a full listing that's reconciled, that tells me exactly what has or hasn't been prepaid, and then being able to check that against the open items list to see whether or not some of those invoices have been paid and all the rest of it. It can be a complicated process. Some tasks are not easily repeatable. So you do a TAC. If anyone's done one of those, they are quite a lot of work to do. And, if somebody turns around and says, you've missed that, or I've had to do a journal because we found an error, it's not a very welcoming thing when you have to redo some of your work. And then the volume of data, we just agree, was too high. We've got disconnected data held in spreadsheets. So we have had issues where that TAC was done 1 week, this TAC was done the other week, but they might not line up. Your spreadsheet doesn't match my spreadsheet. Is a classic problem, and it's because the data is disconnected. It's not connected to one version of the truth, one single source of data. So that was the main issue. So before we go into sort of like the wider presentation, I'm just going to quickly talk about what our sort of solution to a lot of this is. So this hasn't come out of nowhere. We have been developing some of these tools over a longish period of time. We currently have something called a SQL database, which is where we are now holding most of our core data from our ledger. Now, the reason we went down this route was it was years ago. Our auditor wanted to see all our transactions, so we had to download them anyway, and the spreadsheets that we were downloading were too big at the time, so we compiled them in an Access database. And we actually found this was really, really good for feeding information to the auditors so they could pick samples and all the rest of it. We moved on to SQL about 4 years ago, when our IT department said with the implementation of Microsoft 365, you can't have Access anymore. But we will give you a free version of SQL, which is called SQL Express. We've now moved on to a paid-for version, but that's something we could talk about at the end of the presentation. We were able to massively improve our ability to analyze data once we'd done that. The moment we went onto SQL, we were doing lots of really interesting things. So we've always had sort of a SQL database, but because we're storing all our data there, it's allowed us to focus more on how to get the data out quickly. So another thing that we have is we've got all the linked working papers directly to a trial balance or to SQL if it requires transactions. So we'll show you an example of that as we go into the presentation. Another key thing we've done, because we've been able to link our working papers to the SQL database, we can now automate some of these TACs. So we can refresh a TAC working paper and it can be ready in minutes, not days. So if I was to talk to Wasim and say, can we have a look at the receivables TAC, we could just refresh it and we'd pretty much have it there. I'm not saying it'd be perfect. There might be an error that we need to work our way through, but the actual work of going and getting the data, processing it, can happen almost instantly. We've automated the AOB process in the similar sort of way, because it is about going in, getting transactions and processing those. But part of our solution, and we've got to be clear about this, is changing the way that we actually ask people to do things. So one of the key fundamentals we have is that there's going to be certain code combinations for accruals where we would always expect those accruals to reverse. I think when I first started off in our trust, sometimes people would do adjustment journals. We would just live with it. We'd look at them, but we actively police this now. It's like, if it doesn't work in the way that we're expecting, we'll be downloading it into SQL and looking at it pretty much within a couple of hours of it happening, and then we'll say, this has to be reversed out and put in properly. So, like I said, there is a policing element to some of this stuff we're going to show you. And the other thing that we've done is the agreement of balances. Everything gets coded to a sub-analysis 2 code for each individual organisation, and we use that to pull up all the different categories for AOB. So we will also police that. So, for example, if someone does an NHS accrual, we will check that across both sides of the accrual. They've coded to an organisation. But we've got quite automated checks, so it's really quick and easy to spot effectively. But that is something that we do. So just quickly moving on to yourself, Wasim, at this point, we're just going to show you some of these working papers that we've developed.
Yeah.
Then afterwards, I'm going to do a bit of a live demonstration and show you how simple or not it is to set one of these things up.
Thank you, Simon. So my demonstration would be hopefully a quick one, just to show you how a few of the TACs work, but also to give you an idea of what we were dealing with previously. So this is what we had, not the prior year end, and this TAC would work in a way where we would populate each tab based on either the accruals listing here. We've just redacted some of the data just for this presentation, but it'll get populated through these accrual data or for our year-end creditors and debtors list. And so once we've done that, we would then agree it to the TB. However, as Simon mentioned, if the TB, if there's position changes, if somebody puts an adjustment through, we will have to redo the working paper. And how that would work would be to delete all of these lines, keep the main headings from this is Smart View. So this is what's linked from, as I mentioned, from NEP directly to our trial balance. So we would delete all the subcategories, just say, and keep the bigger code, and then expand it. But then we would then have to redo all of this, format this properly again, because this is all based on the sheet, because it's bit temperament. Sheet 1 the smart view can be temperamental, so we avoid using formulas directly on this sheet, and we use it in a different tab to link to it. And then we would then have to re-download the accruals listing. This probably would stay the same, and then populate all of this and refresh the pivot tables. If it agrees to the TB, it's fine. If it doesn't agree to the TB, we can then highlight figure out what the issue is. Probably somebody's coded non-NHS accrual to an NHS entity, or it might be that somebody's creating put through an adjustment, and this report only looks at accruals. So again, it highlights the issues quickly. So there's all of these tabs that get populated. I think the issue with what we found with this is, like I mentioned before, is that if somebody changes the position, we will have to redo this. So it's the TAC itself is not a long process to do, but what we found is that having at year end, when multiple positions change every day, doing this every day kind of adds to it. And we thought, could we come up with a process that kind of automates all of this bit, so we don't have to then redo the working paper every time position changes. And with that in mind, we created something called it's the working paper for TAC 18 receivables. So in how this works is as Sam mentioned, is linked to our SQL database, but we also agree it to the TB. So we have two forms of verification to show that the TB matches to what we have on SQL. So just to give us some sort of assurance, this is the same working paper, it's just set up a bit differently. And this itself how this would work now is we also have the age debtor list already into SQL as well, because we have all of that information. All we need to do here is just change the drop-down panels in here. So let's just say if I go to Q3, if I want to do Q3, will change the year-end date and the accounting period to this. As you can see, the smart view date's not right. So what I'd expect is this to be do not agree once I refresh the data, because we're comparing month 12 data to month 9. So for the time being, so once it's refreshed, it shouldn't take too long. I think it takes long enough for you to think about getting a coffee or a tea, but not long enough for you to actually go and get it. So this usually takes within maybe 10 to 20 seconds to update. And once that's done, you'll hopefully see some of this kind of update and refresh. So if I go down now, as you can see, we've got month 9 data, so it doesn't agree as what we would expect. So all I just need to do, as mentioned in the first tab, go over to the TB, change this to December 2024, sorry. And then refresh this. This is our smart view or Hyperion, I think some organizations might call it that. If I go back to the summary page, it all agrees. So this then, what we have is reporting by exception as well with this tab. It looks at every single tab. So if something didn't agree, it'll just split it out by tab. So I know what tab to check. It allows me to kind of focus my areas rather than thinking, oh, the whole balance doesn't agree. What part of the balance doesn't agree? And I can just quickly go in and find the issues and try to remedy that. This then is populated for our main TAC that we filled out itself. So this is kind of taken from our working papers, is automatically kind of updated. And so every single time position changes, we just need to refresh the database using this refresh button, and it will make sure that this now agrees to the TB and agrees to what the latest position is. We also, I think that's what we also have other checks in place again to make sure that this all works through. This is what we've got. We've got this in place for most of our TACs. So it's something similar to this, but I'll just demonstrate AOB because that it is slightly it's a bit more complicated and it has a bit more going for it. So AOB, the process is similar. I can refresh the data if you want me to, but it's the same process as just refresh it, it changes it, updates it. But this is what we have at year end. So if I go to AOB revenue check at year end, as you can see, so the stuff's been redacted again, but we've agreed it to the penny. So this is what we have on our AOB working papers, and this is what we have on our ATR, which is our SQL database. So this AOB is the script that we've written, and this is what we agreed to the TB. So this is agreed to the TB to the penny. So that's fine. That's a check that we have. If anything's on, what we found in Q3 that it was out by 1,500, and that's purely because we didn't have the subjective two codes for 3 entities, and so at year end we fixed that. We put the subjective codes in, and it kind of picked it all up. And for the BS check as well, this is balance sheet check. We have a check where these codes should be 0, these lines, because these are non-NHS entities. Non-NHS subjective codes. So we would not expect any AOB balances to be coded to here, and so this all works fine. So with this one, we have like if anybody's done AOB, you know how complicated the process is. We have a 4-way check in this one where we check to the TB, the SQL's database, but we also check to the tax themselves. So if I go to balance sheet by AOB, you'll be able to see that this itself is agreeing to TAC 18. So this itself is TAC 18, and it's basically telling me that these numbers are right. So when I put these numbers into the PFR form and the WGA tabs, it won't create any validation errors. And so that's a big thing, because we always find that you kind of think you've done it right, you put in, and then you're like, okay, I'm 1,000 off, I'm this amount off, and trying to figure out what that is. This tells you, it highlights the issues itself. So if I go down here as well, so at year end it was all agreed, but at Q3 that we were 1,000 off from here and 500, and that's purely because we didn't have the subjective codes, and so once that we input them in, it all agrees. And yeah, I can just refresh it just to show you how quick this process is, but I'll just click the refresh button rather than change the dates, but because it's you can just see it over here. But this is the whole AOB process, and it's every single transaction. So as you can see, we have our revenue was 764 million, and so this itself, since I clicked refresh, it's probably been about 10 seconds. Once this is done, once this is done from here, we can then it's basically been refreshed, and then it's ready to kind of use. Again, we have that reporting by exception over here where it highlights any issues on each tab, and once that's done, it allows us to kind of go in and focus our attention to the areas which need fixing, rather than the areas which the whole area as the whole area. So this is, again, it's just refreshed. That's how it would
show
work.
the yellow tabs, Wasim, as well, because that's.
Yep, sure. So then this itself is the providers tabs. Again, this is auto-populated based on these 2 tabs over here. So, and the commissioner tab, we just go and paste the data in. And how it's worked since we've got this in place is that we paste the data in, and I think I would say about 90% of the time we don't have any issues, but we do find there's some rounding sometimes, but that's the easy fix itself. So we might be out by 1 or 2, but that's just a rounding error on the PFR form, which is something which is easily fixable. And that is basically AOB. A really quick way. I've got one more thing to quickly show as well, is that we have not only can we get it on a transactional, kind of all the transaction basis, we can also kind of do it on journal basis. So we have an agency and bank accrual that we do at year end, and what we have is we can code it to how. So what it does, it picks up the brought forward journal that we have, but it also picks up the latest journal. So if this was Q3, this will then change to the end of December, kind of the journal that's posted there, and it just automatically picks it up rather than me having to go to NEP and search for specific journals with certain line descriptions or try to find them from management accounting downstairs. This tool kind of, we put the parameters in place because we know what area the journal usually hits. We know what the journal line description usually is. So by putting that in place, it's kind of picked up certain journals, and this is, again, it's automatically given. So if somebody's then decided to adjust their journal, we just refresh this, and it automatically updates this TAC 9, the summary tab. But yep, that is basically a quick tour of how it works. We have working papers for most of the tax, and so now it's just a case of refresh. If all of this summary page agrees, we have confidence, because we have confidence in the controls that we've got multiple checks in place, that this is now ready to kind of be input into the PFR form, and that's allowed us to kind of give us more time to have more quality on accounts, because we finished, I think, approximately, was it about a week earlier then because we set the position, or we were doing some adjustments late as well. So once that was done, we had about a week again to kind of focus on quality accounting. So kind of looking through our, for example, our prepayment balances. Do they all meet the definitions of prepayments, as in do they relate to the proper year? Have they been paid, or should they be deferred, etc.? But stuff like that, we weren't able to have that quality control beforehand.
I think we definitely cleared all the validations before the bank holiday, so it was a lot earlier than normal. So it did help a lot. And do you want me to go on to my bit? Wasim, have you finished there? Okay, so I'll share my screen. So what I'm going to try and demonstrate now, if I've shared the right screen, is, sorry, because I'm sharing, might need to stop the presentation, to be honest. I've got a few examples. Right, okay, here we go. Right, I'm just going to stop the presentation because I can't see my taskbar. It isn't really helpful, is it? So if I just come out of that for 2 seconds, we'll go back to that in a minute. So what I wanted to show people is the database very, very quickly. I'm not going to go into too much technical detail, but what I also then wanted to quickly do is just show you how easy it is once you've got the database to, sorry, I'm just moving some windows across. It's just, it's quite hard. Right, there you go. So I'm just going to show how easy it is to talk to the SQL database using Excel, and I'm going to give you an example of a very simple one we did at year end and how quick it is to set it up, and hopefully we'll see what people think. So in terms of the database, what we do is there's other stuff in here that's not finance. We've got drugs data in here, for example, because we're building something with pharmacy. But the main ones to remember are our ledgers called NEP. So we've got our NEP data in here. We have a selection of tables. So these tables come off the data extracts from NEP. We then process those data into something called views. If you've ever used Access, it's just basically a query. It allows us to have a nicely curated stream of data that people can connect to. We also have other things like master data. So I'm just going to quickly show you this because I don't think there's anything here particularly confidential. It's just literally, for example, on the views, it's got our hierarchy. So what I'm going to show you now is I've already loaded a hierarchy into Excel, but I'm going to link to something. So because we're doing a demonstration and I don't want to show anybody anything that we shouldn't, I've created a view that just basically shows our transactional data basically for the whole year, but it doesn't include things like journal numbers, invoice numbers, journal line descriptions, all that sort of stuff. So it'll just show you TB combinations type stuff, but it has got a bit of transactional stuff. So it's got things like posting date, it's got journal source name, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how you can bring that data into Excel very, very quickly and what you can do with it. So what I'm going to do is I've got an example here. So this is a completely blank workbook. So anybody who's got access to Excel can do what I'm going to just show you now. There's no hidden systems or anything like that. So all you have to do is go to data and just create something. So I've already created a connection to my SQL database before. So if I go to recent sources, I can just pick up the database from there. And then what you'll see is once it's connected, it looks exactly the same, not completely the same, but it's very similar to the database itself. So you'll see this tool has connected to the database. You can see that it's giving me an option. It's like, which of these do you want to link to? So in terms of security, we can set up security. So different people have different level of access. So all our finance users, for example, have a Windows directory group that we can then restrict access to, and we could do it for different parts of the organization. You can also do row level security. But as I've got quite high level access, I can see everything. So all I need to do now is to go into the demo, pick up the view, gives me a preview, that's great. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to transform the data because I don't want to take all of that data into my spreadsheet. Now, I am going to show you a better way of doing this using SQL afterwards, but it might be a little bit out of the scope of this meeting. So for now, I'm going to do it in a very simple way. So what I'm effectively going to show you is how do you just get the balance sheet stuff out of here. So when we're doing our public dividend capital calculation for the dividend, we have to work out what our net relevant assets are. So one thing you might want to do is say where is the top half of the balance sheet. Well, I know from the NEP system that anything below 300,000 is the top half of the balance sheet. So I'm just going to say, give me all transactions that have been coded to a GL code or subjective code that's less than 300,000. So if I put that filter on, it filters it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to close and load, but I'm not going to load it into the spreadsheet straight away. I'm going to do something called a data model. So if I only create a connection, it doesn't put it in Excel. What it'll do is it'll load it into a data model. Now, this is important because a lot of people think spreadsheets can only hold 1 million records. And if you did put 1 million records in, you're going to get in a lot of trouble very, very quickly because of the volume. But it does come with a data model that uses the same technology as Power BI. So if you do this, it will then load it in. So just to show you how quickly this runs, I think it's about 700,000 transactions. Usually runs in about, well, because I'm at home today, it's probably going to take about 2-3 seconds. But if you're in the office and you're on-prem, it can be even quicker. There you go. I've downloaded nearly 1 million records into a spreadsheet, and I'm ready to go. So all you need to do is if you want to enable Power Pivot, it's just an add-in, but it's available to anybody who's got Excel. I'm just going to go to the data model. So if anyone's ever used Access, they might recognize this. It's the relationship browser. It's a similar sort of technology. So I'm just going to say I want my GL code or subjective code to be where the link is. So this is instead of a VLOOKUP. So a VLOOKUP is always processing. It's it crashes spreadsheets. This is going to just create the relationships when you need them. So I've just told it basically that on the hierarchy table, it's the same code as on the data table. So if I then go to insert, I can insert a pivot table. I'm going to insert it from the data model. Yes, please, put it there. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring the amount. So there you go. That's the top half of my balance sheet. Because I can't read numbers without commas, I'm just going to format that very, very quickly so I can read it if that's okay. There we go, £75 million. And what I'll do next is I'll just go to the hierarchy table and just bring you some things so you can sort of see it is a balance sheet. There we go. Now, this is probably what you're thinking is this is just TB level information, big deal. But the point here is when I'm at year end and I'm having conversations about the position is going to change by £2 million because of this reason, that reason, or something else, what effect has that got on PDC? Well, sometimes you need to know what's happening, where it's happening, and who's done it and when. So what I've got here is an example. So there is other stuff that we've hidden. So I could tell you, for example, who's done the journals and all the rest of it. But this is a very simple example. I can bring the posting date in. So I could say, for example, how has that position changed? Just let me select multiple items. Just takes a couple of seconds to tick that box. There you go. So I'm going to deselect. And I can find out what's gone into the ledger and how and when. So anything after the 15th, what happened. So when you're trying to monitor the year-end position and finding out what's going on, that's quite actually a useful tool because it allows you to adapt to changes very quickly. So I'm going to select it all back and just sort of give you an example. This is transactional data because if you, for example, wanted to look at journal source name, I could tell how have all these different journal types interacted with the balance sheet. You can't do that on a TB because the TB doesn't drill down low enough to be able to pull some of that information in. So for us, in terms of reconciling and year end and looking at quality and making sure things have gone in the right place when you've got some of that additional time, this is a really useful thing to be able to do. So in a Blue Peter style, here's one I've done earlier. This is exactly the same report, but it's slightly more sophisticated because it's using something called a DAX measure. So in terms of DAX, what that allows you to do in Power BI is to use measures. So we can look at all of that data. We can say, can you show me the brought forward amounts? Can you show me the cumulative totals? I was able to write a DAX measure that would do that. So when I'm monitoring the PDC position at year end, I was able to use this working paper and I could effectively, as before, check the periods and see how things had been moving. And the point is, if anything had changed at all, I could just refresh it. If I want to see what the movement needs to be, I can just say pick 3 dates that have happened since, and then that's the adjustment that goes in. And because it is completely transactional, you can actually see the detail behind the journal as well. So here's another link showing you, for example, what the PDC was made up of. I can highlight which bits are accruals, which bits are cash, and sort of like check it all coming in. And it's all dynamically linked. So it's very, we found it very, very powerful in terms of what we were able to do. And just to give you an idea of, so this is for people who've already used SQL. It's just to show you what you can do as well. So I'm just going to edit this because when I was showing you the Power Query side of things, I was showing you a very simple way of doing it. You can, if you want to set stuff up on SQL, you can actually wrap a SQL query with a Power BI, not Power BI, Power Query script. So that's what we often do, is we do a bit of analysis in SQL. We think that's useful. We then wrap it around a Power Query script because we think it might be something we want to dynamically refresh as we go through a particular period. And that being said, if I want to use this for next year, all I have to do is change the database to 25, 26, refresh it, and I've got the same working paper ready to go, ready, refreshed, no extra work required. So I'm just going to come out of that and go back to my presentation, if that's okay. So I might just go to slideshow from current slide. So what we thought we'd just touch on is our sort of reflection on the year end and how we think it went as a result of these innovations that we put forward. So I think myself and Wasim have talked about this. You know, there are things that you do on your accounts that are manual, that are involving, you know, work, but there are other things that you do every year that are just the same thing. It's like, I've got to download this, I've got to put that in there, I've got to do quite a lot of manual stuff, and we think we've probably taken 2 weeks out. We were able to populate a TAC form pretty substantially as soon as the position was set. Obviously, working out all the errors and the justify or whatever's or comments takes slightly longer, but the actual amount of work we took out, I think, was about 2 weeks, which really, really helped this year. It's exceptions-based reporting, so we're only reacting when something doesn't work. So when one of the mismatches happens on a working paper or something looks odd, we're digging into that detail and looking there, and then rather than being, I've got to get this done first and then we'll have a look at that. And the other thing just to mention, when Wasim was talking about the AOB, now we've got time to ask people to put the journals back in. We could just refresh the working papers and the working paper is correct, whereas in the past we might have done quite a lot of manual adjustments on some of the forms. So again, it improves the quality for audit. We're able to do some monthly rehearsals, so we can do AOB any month of the year. Now, obviously not going to do the mismatches, but we can aggregate those transactions and see what they look like whenever we want. The AOB automation saved many hours. Wasim currently does this. I've done it in the past, and you know, from our perspective, there might be a better way of doing it, but we've never found it. It's a very process-intensive job and can be very frustrating. And we were just making the point that it doesn't involve any external solution. I mean, we've been contacted in the past by sort of other providers saying we can do stuff on AOB for you, but given that we can send the statements out ourselves using a macro and then we can aggregate all the transactions using SQL, we kind of have it all covered, and it costs us nothing, so we like that. We just wanted to touch a little bit on what we're trying to achieve here. This is probably a bit theoretical, but we thought we'd just show you anyway, because this is kind of the sort of strategy we've got for the year end. So on here is just an example of what happens when a deadline gets shifted or you're in a time constraint pressure. We feel like sometimes when we've got 2 weeks to do the accounts after the year end positions be set on and all the rest of it, it's difficult because ideally you'd want to be at deadline 1 to get enough accuracy into the into your work to be able to be confident going to an audit. But ultimately, if you haven't got enough time, you only have a certain amount of time to do it, your accuracy is going to be lower, and you're going to potentially have audit risk. So there is one solution, but for month-end reporting, for example, we do day 1 reporting, we shift our deadlines back. That works for month-end reporting, but that doesn't work for for year end because of audit risk. The auditors would not be happy if we shut our subledgers a week early. So we've had to at year end shut them all at the normal time, because then we have enough quality in the accounts. But it's one of those. So our approach is to change the curve effectively. Is what we're saying is, if we can do things quicker and we're not manually processing those tasks, we can get to a point effectively where we meet the deadline, and hopefully it's better than it was, even if we had loads of time compared to the other one. It's a lot better. But we're not saying any of this is perfect. There is always room for improvement. It's just massively improved our ability to hit that deadline and do it effectively. So what we're saying here, so I'm just doing a time check to myself. The how. So what we've tried to do in financial services and the finance team more widely is we've made a decision. We want to empower our team in SQL and Power Query at all levels. And that's because we've been on a journey, and every time we started using these tools, it's just really delivered. So, we just feel like it should be part of an accountant's toolkit. If you know SQL, you know Power Query, as well as your accounts and Excel, it's going to really, really help in sort of developing some of this stuff. We've tried to create a culture of innovation. I've just picked up a random tag phrase from the internet, but it kind of is the point, isn't it? Fail freely, learn fast, rise higher. It's just, if we can encourage people to get into the mindset of wanting to experiment, wanting to innovate, not being scared to fail, we can come up with some of these ideas. It's about, if something doesn't work, move on quickly. It's the iterative development. It doesn't have to be perfect first time. We can learn from our mistakes. We improve, we repeat. So obviously, the first time we try and automate a TAC, it's not going to work very well. But, we come back to it and we try and improve it. And we think we've got the right recipe for doing what we want. But what's also really important is making it built to last. So once we've rapidly prototyped a solution, we do go back and look at it and say, is there a way of improving this so it's sustainable going forward? I mean, just a very simple example is when we first built our databases, our views, which are the queries, were referencing, they were hard coding the financial years, so we couldn't script those into the following year's database because we had to go and rename everything. So we've tried to set it up in a way that if we create a new database, we just script the new year's views into the following year's database. And the only thing that changes is the database name. So it is about having time to reflect on what you've done, improve it, and make sure it's scalable and it can be improved going forward. And what I think is absolutely essential, and I think I went to a One NHS Innovation presentation on the future of finance, and the guy did a really good presentation. He mentioned something called the flywheel of innovation. That really resonated with me, because it is about what you do when you make an improvement. You're going to get a bit of capacity. You're going to get some development capacity in your team. It's about reinvesting that to get more development capacity. And through that process, you're able to very quickly start to improve the way that you do things. So that's the how. I just thought I'd give some learning resources. So people might say, where have you learned this? Well, there isn't a single person working in our finance team who has any real IT background. It's all stuff that we've taught ourselves over the years. So the first thing I just like to signpost, and I went on this when it first came out, and I thought it was a really good initiative, and it was showing the right sort of skills I think accountants do need, which was the software skills for accountants. Covered things like SQL, Power BI, Power Query, some of the Excel stuff, as well as Power Automate. All of those skills are absolutely essential, and I think us focusing on the SQL and the Power Query, Power BI has been really, really good, and that was a good resource. There's so many free sites out there. There's this one I really like called W3 School. What that effectively does, it gives you a sandbox environment for SQL. It gives you lots of examples where it will tell you how to sort of learn the language, and then you can sort of practice it a little bit. And it doesn't take a long time to do, and it's really, really good. So I'm going to say ChatGPT. Everyone says ChatGPT, but the reason I'm just saying it here is I wouldn't go straight to ChatGPT if you're trying to learn SQL. But once you've got a certain level of knowledge where you understand it and you can read it, it is a very, very powerful tool. So we can just ask it questions. So for example, when we're trying to automate the flow of data into our database, we know that stored procedures is kind of the right approach, but you might have an example of a data extract. Now, we don't load data into ChatGTP, but if we've got a schema, sort of like a data structure, we will say, I want to load this CSV file with these headers into this table. Can you write me a stored procedure? And then the code just gets created. It's really, really effective. I would say ChatGTP is probably taken 2 years off our development cycle in terms of what we've been able to do. It's a really, really powerful tool. And we do something called internal development sessions where everybody who's working on this can meet on a regular basis, and we show each other what we've been doing. And if you're very keen, I think I'm the only one who's done this in our team, but you know, you can buy books on this stuff and read in your spare time if you want. But there's so many other things out there, and YouTube's another thing you can look at. It's not something I've used, but it is also there. So I'm just going to quickly explain the detail, then we'll go into a Q&A if anyone's got any questions. So at Mid Yorkshire, what do we actually have? We've got 2 SQL databases, and that's purely because they're in 2 separate locations. One's at Dewsbury, one's at Pinderfields, just in case one goes down. We've got resilience. We do have a Power BI workspace, but that's kind of out of the scope of what we've done today. Nothing we've shown you today involves Power BI. We use Excel a lot. We use the Power Pivot tool within Excel, and we use Power Query. It's quite a recent development now, but we do appreciate that because we've learned a lot of this stuff ourselves, we probably need to just take a step back and see if we are doing everything 100% correct. So we've actually engaged 2 finance staff in an apprenticeship on data analytics because we feel that we need a bit more formal learning as well. And it's not just about ledger data. So we've currently working with our pharmacy department to bring all the drugs issued within the trust onto our database, so we can start helping them see where drug spend is, what they're spending on, and all the rest of it. And that's been really, really well received by pharmacy. And there's just other things that we've been doing as well. So we got told in our ISA 260 report that we needed to be checking all of our prepayments didn't relate to invoices that hadn't been paid, for example. So we quickly went in from the open items report. We're able to double check whether or not all of our prepayments have been paid or not paid. Again, this is about policing. We've asked the management accountants when they're putting in their prepayments to quote an invoice number. So we were able to very rapidly check. We've created them a little tool that does the check for them, but then we were able to do another check. And then the other thing that we were able to do is we've been able to load every single ledger transaction with a hierarchy, so invoices, receipts, journals, the lot, in one pivot table that we send over to audit using the Power Pivot tool, and they're able to pick all their samples, and they've been doing that for it's about 4 years now. That was it. It's really well received by them. So that's kind of our setup.
It's made that's made our audit process a lot easier because they are able to identify actual transactions. So for example, they don't then just pick a random journal which has 50 transactions inside them. Then they're able to kind of focus on like sales invoices, purchase invoices through the Power Pivot. So it's made our audit life a lot easier.
Yeah, and I think it is. We have quite a good relationship with them now because I think they quite like it. So just my key takeaways: finance-led automation is achievable and it is impactful. It has made a massive impact on our year end. Small changes can yield massive efficiency gains. So what we're saying is this doesn't have to be big. It's like you can go in and learn some of these things slowly and build it up over time. Empowering staff with tools does result in sustained transformation. Ready for audit every month of the year. So what we're saying is we could literally produce our audit papers for April, May if we wanted. Obviously, the quality of the journals might not be 100% as good, but the point is we could produce the working papers. And we're just saying the 2 key things to learn if you want to take any of this away is SQL and Power Query is a very, very efficient and effective tool. And it's just like the last question is, and this always comes up, it's like, why are you guys accountants, why are you doing this? And it comes back to, it more resource intensive to train up an accountant in some of these SQL Power Query skills, or would you like to take somebody from IT or somebody with data analytics background and train them up to be a qualified accountant? Either way, you're going to get the same skill sets. But I think accountants, well, specifically in our organisation, have been able to pick up these skills quite quickly and used it to quite good effect. So that's my reflections. So I'm just going to go on to, if anyone's got any questions or any reflections on what we've just presented.
Hi, Simon. There's a question in the chat.
Oh, right, okay.
How we import the data into the databases, and I briefly answered. I don't know if you'd like to go into further details on it.
Yeah, we would like API access to our core finance system, and it is something that we do talk to our ledger provider about. But at this specific moment in time, we are just having to run something called an OTBI report. Once that data is extracted, we can very rapidly ingest that data into SQL using a store procedure. So yeah, it is at the moment just done manually, but it's something that of everything, like I keep mentioning in this presentation, it's iterative. We want to keep improving as we keep going forward. But even if it took a day, a month to get this data in the SQL database, I think we would still get benefit. It's just so powerful having all that data instantly accessible at a transactional level. So at year end, I almost completely dispensed with Excel at some point. So I was just writing SQL queries to pull interesting bits of information out of that database to be able to ask questions. So it's about level of maturity and how you go about it. But at the moment, it is just a plain text upload into the database. Yeah. Is there another question in the chat? Just noticed someone said, did you say set up a SQL database from Excel? We import the data from SQL into Excel. So a SQL database is a database that's been specifically built to take SQL queries. So we're using Microsoft SQL. Other variants do exist. I believe there's Oracle SQL databases. There's things like MySQL. But because we're sort of locked into the Microsoft ecosystem, we use the Microsoft. And it is just literally a good way of storing your data, because one of the things we've also got to wrestle with, and I think a lot of finance teams wrestle with this, is as accountants, we tend to store a lot of our data in spreadsheets with pivot tables stuck on top. And you can literally have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of files within an organization with that data locked into an Excel file. Well, you can't really manage that data very well in those circumstances, because you don't always know what you're storing and how much of it, and is it disconnected data that doesn't tie back because things have moved on and all the rest of it. So trying to get everything into SQL for us is about having that one version of the truth as well. Any other questions, or do you want?
I'm back. I think,
Oh, hang on. How long did it take for you to implement all of this, and what advice would you give to someone looking to start using these tools? Well, for us, I think it's been quite a long journey, just purely for the fact that we've been very slowly trying to figure out what we can and can't do with this sort of stuff. But I think now sort of tools like ChatGPT exist, other trusts sort of showing what they can do, and it could be a lot more rapid than that. My advice would be to download some of this stuff. It's free. So Power BI, for example, there's a desktop version that's free to start off with. SQL Express, up to 10 gigabytes of data, I believe, is free to use. it is about possibly just having a look. Go on YouTube as well, just look at some tutorials and maybe some of the websites to just see if it's something that you feel like you'd want to use. But there are tools like Power Query that are in Excel that I think people could be using now. Any data that you have, it's a really fantastic tool for getting that data into your spreadsheet and building things like data models, getting that data into Power Pivot rather than just storing it in tables in Excel will also bring benefits. I mean, if somebody wants to, talk to us outside of the meeting about sort of our journey and, any advice, I'm always happy to talk to people. Have you got anything there, Wasim? I don't know.
No, I think it was like we're more than happy to kind of express what we've learned and kind of show like what to do. But I think the way it works for us is that we have a lot of policing as well. So like we work in a certain way that allows us to do this. For example, as Simon mentioned beforehand, all the accruals, certain accrual codes, we only expect accruals to go in. So I know that's not the same case for every trust. So it's just, I think it's the key three key takeaways is that you should, like, if you've got access to a readily available database, if you are policing your accounts properly in terms of so that your working papers are as accurate as they can be. And then thirdly is that if you have accountants who have the skills to kind of extract this data and analyze what they need to convert it to the working papers. But I think all three are essential in order to kind of get started and kind of have these working as efficiently as they should be.
Yeah, and I suppose my other advice would be, you don't have to always. I don't know. For us, I think we've slowly sort of realised that this is possible, but it's about the challenge is try it, and if it doesn't work, what's the worst that you've done? You've learned a bit of SQL. Do you know what I mean? The best thing could be that you get 2-3 weeks back at year end, and it's that sort of thing, isn't it? I just think for us, it's allowed us to open up a big sort of innovation. I don't know what the right words are, but it's allowed us to be more creative in the way that we go about solving problems, definitely. And it's made the job a lot more rewarding as well, I think. More interesting.
I'll just to add on to that, Simon, I would say we've got friends at other organizations who've had similar questions who are completely new to databases, Power Query, Power BI, and all of the sort of stuff that we're doing our organization. And people often ask the question, how do we get started? And I think one of the best ways to get started is through the SDN network. They offer, I think most of the NHS organizations are signed up to the SDN network, and they offer courses on SQL databases, Power Query, and Power BI. I would highly recommend starting off on one of those courses. It's just formal learning. You'll be introduced to these tools in a sort of formal manner. And I like myself, Wasim, we had zero knowledge about these tools. Simon, he's basically our organization. He was the pioneer in all of this, really. We didn't have a clue, but we were just basically guided by Simon that, look, you can do this, do that. We went on the SD. To begin with, we started off on the SDN courses, and then internally, we spoke with our IT department. Like Simon mentioned about the SQL Server, there's a free version, SQL Express, and we just asked our IT department to allow us to download that on our PCs. We got it on our PCs. We downloaded the free version of Power BI and Power Query, the most recent version of Excel. It has that embedded within it. I think since 2010, Power Query has been a part of Excel. So we just began using the tools, experimenting with it, and we found quickly that in not just, I mean, the presentation is about the TAC, the year-end TAC automation, but we just found that it benefited a lot in our other day-to-day activities and tasks that we did using these tools. And we just started from there and gradually built up as we began to use these tools more and more. we became more confident. And before the arrival of things like ChatGPT and AI tools, you know, we, between ourselves, it was the courses and reading books. That's how we began. But now, since you've got things like ChatGPT and AI tools, our sort of development has accelerated significantly, and it's just made everything so much easier. I think if you just have a basic understanding of SQL and a basic understanding of Power Query, the rest you can get from ChatGPT, and it's not as difficult as it might seem like, to be honest. Like, we were completely brand new to it. You want to add, Simon?
Yeah, I was just saw a question in the chat about, do you write back corrections into GL? Do you fix things? That's kind of the point, I think, is we now have time to check stuff and ask people to put the journals in. We refresh the data, get it into SQL, we refresh our working papers, and the working papers then correct. So it gets us ready for audit. We're not saying to auditors, the TB is wrong because we've got a manual adjustment on this working paper, but the accounts is okay. It's about, it allows us to use the ledger as it should be for the corrections to go in. But I appreciate your comments, Adil. I think that's a really good way of summing up the way that we've gone about the SQL stuff. It's just, the more you use it, it's like Excel. In the 80s, Excel came along and revolutionized accountancy, didn't it? And made a lot of those manual jobs a lot easier. Well, from my perspective, it's a little bit like carrying on that journey. We've now got some really powerful tools that allows us to deal with our data more efficiently and effectively. And if we learn those tools, it takes us further along that journey of getting out the information we want and spending our time focusing on the errors, the issues that need action, rather than processing time on data just to get an answer. Because, like I say, the amount of time we have in the NHS to do accounts is absolutely mind-bogglingly small. I mean, my background's local authority accounting, and we used to have 2-3 months to do the accounts. You come to the NHS, it's like, what do you mean? It's like you've got 3 weeks, but you've got 1 week to wait for financial management. It's like, you just don't think it's possible. But the point is, we're always under that pressure, aren't we, in the NHS? And I think for us, it's just about trying to get on that curve that I was showing you in the presentation earlier on. It's like, is there a better way that gets us more quality, more accuracy sooner, and how do we go about doing that? I've stopped speaking because it's 12 o'clock now, so is that a, oh, hang on, we've got another. All right, so thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks so much for your session today. Hopefully everyone found it useful. I will share the recording and the slides afterwards, so keep an eye out for an email. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.